welcome to our virtual conversations with leaders. And today we are speaking with another fantastic leader whom I introduce shortly. I should probably introduce myself as well. My name is Rena Goldenberg-Lynch, and I'm the founder and CEO of Voice at the Table. And we've been having these conversations throughout the year. So there are quite a few of them already, and it's great to hear leaders from various sectors share very similar insights on the power of diversity and inclusion in their particular sectors and in particular areas of work. Today, I'm really excited to introduce to you our guest speaker, Dr. Karen Jones. Karen is Director in Europe Marketing Immunodiagnostics. So as part of the Thermo Fisher empire of life sciences business. And before we get started, Karen, if we could have an explanation maybe of your role, as well as maybe a few words about Thermo Fisher and what they do and your journey with them. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Rena. Yeah, it's a pleasure to join. So my role is really as a marketing director of Europe for the businesses that we call immunodiagnostics, which include allergy diagnostics as well as immune diagnostics. And we have a one system that you can test allergy and autoimmune across that particular system, which we ultimately provide to our laboratory customers. And in the process of doing that, we come into contact with doctors, patients, healthcare systems, and testing laboratories, whether they're private or public, across Europe. And we navigate the reimbursement landscape, which is different from country to country, and align with the regulations as well. So it's quite a complex marketing strategy that we put in place, because it has to communicate with all those different types of people. And so I've got a broad and varied team of experts, and they are marketing communications team who do sort of digital and asset generation, content creation, social media, and those kinds of things that we're familiar with marketing. But we also have market development experts who look at the strategy that we need to adopt across Europe, and they are very good at integrating data and market intelligence and putting that together with competitor insights and their knowledge of the customer and the science of it, to come up with a good strategy across from country to country. And then we also have in-country marketers who literally speak the language, understand the reimbursement landscape, and stay really close to our commercial partners to get that to work in their particular country, whether it's Germany and Austria or the UK or France, etc. So yeah, it's quite a team and we've got different functions there, but the key is to align all of them together, so that we can, basically enact what is, a big revenue generating business, and keep it growing right across Europe. So that's my job. Is about 30 people. Yeah, we operate within a very complex organization. And Thermo Fisher is 130,000 people, operating across the globe. In last counts, about 40 billion in revenue. And it's the world leader in serving science, and he does that in the life sciences research through to clinical development, through to manufacture of medicines as well. So also it's in other science areas such as space science and oil and gas industry and engineering as well. So yeah, covers all things. And when we talk about making the world cleaner, healthier, and safer, that's our tagline. So it covers a broad area.
Wow, it's massive. It's and it's global.
Yeah.
And we're mainly focusing on the Europe part
Yes. Yes.
of the team. Well, thank you for that. That gives us a little bit of context. And Karen, so you and I, we've known each other for a few years, and we've had lots and lots of conversations around diversity and inclusion. And I'm just wondering, before we go into sharing some of those conversations with the audience, could you tell us a little bit about your career path? You know, what did it look like? You know, you obviously have a science background, so you were going to be a scientist, and what does the diversity landscape of that looked like, and how has that changed?
Yeah, I think growing up, I wanted to be a scientist, wanted to be a vet, actually.
Oh.
But along the way, I ended up doing a biological sciences degree at Warwick University, and fell into love, I guess, with genetics, molecular genetics in particular. And yeah, from there, decided to focus on that, do a PhD, and go on and do a postdoc. I decided I wanted to go and live in the US at that point when I finished my PhD. So I thought I need to experience living in another country before I get all these responsibilities. So I went over there and had the time of my life, 3 years living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and working in Boston, the Longwood area, medical area. Just surrounded by amazing people, and then very, very diverse. And it was fascinating world of being in a lab of cardiologists at the time, you know, medics, and then there's scientists like me doing a PhD, and plus interns rotating in and out from different walks of life. And we're all sort of studying our different areas using the same techniques. So it was really good melting pot there. But I was very much in this train of thought going, you know, defining myself by my scientific accolades. And I had to actually dismantle that at some point when I realized that it wasn't really filling my cup. I'm not a very detail-orientated, loving person. And you'd need to, if you're going to be a scientist at the bench, you've got to love your data, and you love, you know, repeating the same things over and over again in minutiae. And it just wasn't me. I just couldn't connect with it. And so I decided to switch over into more applied science and decided to move back to the UK into biotechnology. And that's where I found my feet a bit more. But even then, I was in biotechnology science at the bench. And I had the most fun when I went out with the commercial team, because they would rope me in to talk to customers and about the applications we were working with. And I had to have a quiet word with me about my, I don't know, snobby little story that I was saying to myself, which is, you're a scientist and you should be, you know, getting all the publications. And actually what I really loved was this commercial part of science. So then I moved over, which was a real wrench of identity at that point. I must say, I had to shed a load of, I am the expert scientist, and moved into commercial at that point. And then I really started to gain traction and move into marketing of science. And I stayed in that area, broadly speaking, for 25 years. And I've also stayed mostly based in Europe, though I've worked with American companies along the way. But I liked working in Europe just because of the diversity of languages and cultures and everything. Also the time zone, you know, I wanted to live here and not spend my time, you know, on calls or traveling too deeply. So that worked for me. And in terms of a diversity journey, I mean, the wonderful thing about companies that, you know, are highly scientific is that, you know, they employ really, you know, well-educated people with degrees, higher degrees, and so forth. So that's been a really enriching learning experience. And I guess what I've learned along the way is that, you know, your knowledge is minute compared to the collective knowledge of all the people you work with. So you'd better tap into that and park your ego and harness what you can in terms of the learning from others. And that's how I've kind of led my life and figured out how to get from place to place. And then as I've moved within the STEM industry, whether it was pharmaceutical services or contract research organizations that did clinical trials, and then and the testing for pharmaceutical companies, and then I moved into Thermo Fisher for various different areas of their business. I've just realized that you just have to pick this up as you go along, mostly with the expert knowledge of the people you work with, rather than formally learn the content. So I've seen a lot of people who are experts. I work with them in allergy or autoimmune diagnostics, but I feel that my molecular genetics was sort of a grounding of understanding and really seeing eye to eye with scientists, but I've left that behind me, if you like. And I like the fact that I can talk to scientists, doctors and stuff like that, but I also love the fact that I've also picked up commercial side of science, sales, finances, looking at how we're growing, what our strategy is, and really being commercially minded. So it's quite a well-rounded approach, I guess, to my role. And that's what I learn. I love the learning process of that.
Yeah, it's lovely. And from what you said, I'm picking up sort of three different themes. And one is around diversity, I suppose. One is that, recognizing, your own diversity, that you don't have to be stuck in one area, or if you're a scientist, shall we say, or if you have an inclination to science, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stay being a scientist, and there are lots of different application to it. So on an individual basis, there are lots of facets to who we are that we might tap into one time or another. The other thing that I think you inferred as well is that need for diversity for those big organizations, so that you have people who, in a science type organization understand the science, but also have other feathers in the cap, and understanding the commercial realities, and understanding what clients are looking for. So really different backgrounds and different disciplines, the need for that. And then you also mentioned, the understanding of suspending what and relying on somebody else's knowledge. And this really resonates because in the world that we live in, where there's lots of complex issues, more and more we need to rely on the collective intelligence of the team, rather than one extremely intelligent human being, as it may have been when the world wasn't quite as complex as it is today. So that's the need for diversity is real for that collective intelligence.
I think as a marketer as well, you're not good as a marketer if you don't connect with your customers and really understand what they need, whether they're patients, doctors, healthcare systems, lab managers or procurement officers, whoever they are. You have got to have spoken with them, understand what they need, and those needs may well differ from country to country, place to place, hospital to hospital. Absolutely. And by staying grounded in that connection, it makes you really good at your job. And so it's embracing that, being open to communicating and connecting is critical to being a good marketer.
Yes, and it's also critical to being a good inclusive leader. So, and I wanted to also talk a little bit about your passion for diversity and inclusion. And like I said before, we've spoken about it a number of times, and you have been proactively involved in making sure that diversity and inclusion isn't left behind, that it's center stage, that it's strategically looked at by Thermo Fisher, for instance. I wonder whether you can say, where that passion comes from. Where is that drive coming from?
I just absolutely love working with a multinational, diverse set of people. I think it's such a rich learning experience and a rich environment to be in the company of different perspectives. I find that fascinating.
Mm,
And some people, I guess, find it threatening. But I think if you can be in a room with different opinions and have the skill of allowing those opinions to be heard or perspectives to be heard, and then being able to discern what you're going to choose to act on, that's the mark of a good leader. And it's not easy. And you can get it wrong, but being humble enough to say, I got it wrong. We goofed up there. We need to backtrack a bit is also a skill, I suppose. So those are the things I've had to learn along the way, is harnessing those different perspectives in the right
mm,
way. And yeah, what you were saying earlier about, the strong leader that is the all font of all knowledge. That's something I used to see a lot. I still see it from time to time, that sort of ego-led, directive, dominant force that needs to be said and needs to sort of show the way. I've got nothing against that really, but per se, as long as it's in balance. So at some point you have to make a decision about which direction you go in, and that's great. Clarity is great. But if you do it too often, you dampen down the brilliance that is in the room, and people get detached. They check out. They don't feel so motivated to come with you. They don't feel they matter. And, you get this quiet quitting, checking out action that goes on through a leadership style issue that is overused. And
yeah,
I see that.
yeah.
It's happened to me, and yeah.
Yeah, I would refer to it as old school leadership, maybe.
Yeah,
And particularly in light of the need for that collective intelligence, everyone's ideas to be not just generated but harnessed in the
yeah.
meeting room. Before we just go on, I want to prompt people to say, if you have any questions for Karen as we go through this conversation, just pop them into the chat. And lovely Katie here will keep an eye on those, and then we'll spend some time asking you, Karen, put you in the hot seat and see what you think on those particular questions. I may not see them, Katie. So as they come up, I'll check in with you for that.
Mm,
Yes, so talking about leadership, I was thinking what you said about the dominant type of leader, and we see two different types of sort of dominance, if you will. One is that is created through, let's say, fear or that need for respect, and that's what I refer to as perhaps old school, whereas there's another type of a dominant leader that is created through respect. And that's the kind of leader that I would say is an inclusive leader, somebody
mm,
who understands that their own shortcomings and also the need for the team
yeah.
to come up with some ideas and support whatever outcome. That doesn't mean that you are not tasked with making the decision yourself, but
Exactly.
after having that input from others. So I see that as a big part of inclusive leadership. How would you describe it? And do you have any examples of what you would consider good inclusive leadership or that kind of respect?
I can think of a few
Okay.
people I've worked with in my career of both types, and it's got nothing to do with gender either. The,
Thank you for
the
saying that.
no, it isn't. But I think that, well, yeah, you get a tendency, but
Yeah.
I would say that in my mind, the people who I regard as sort of charismatic, amazing leaders have that humility piece to it.
Mm,
So they know they'll hold back. They won't hold back by weaponizing. So you get the hold back sometimes of leaders who are going, oh, I'm just going to speak last, and I'm going to gather all of the, ammo, and then I'm going to go for it. That's not inclusive leader. That's just a fear-led leader. So somebody who sort of waits to speak and then annihilates people is not inclusive. That's just poor. And if you think you're going to get belonging after that, you've got another thing coming. But the type of leader I think I've got in my mind, you know, he or she actually, there's, you know, I've got a couple of examples in my head, just know that they've got the gravitas to have to say something and people will follow, but invite and actually are responsible for employing a great leadership. So, and they invite them to the table to speak so that they can get, you know, they seek counsel. I think that's the word I use in my coaching group. They seek counsel. So they've got a great group of trusted people around them, of good leaders that they've put in place. And they don't just let them be mute. They ask the opinion and then make a, you know, collective decision. And that leads to synergy. And that's when you get, you know, you're in, it's the greater sum of the parts, if you like. So, you know, rather than just picking out one loud leader and going, okay, yeah, we'll go with your voice because it's the most dominant in the room. It's just sort of being smart about hearing them all and then making the best collective decision. And I find when you're in a great, really well facilitated team call with somebody like that, you build on each other. So somebody comes up with an idea and then somebody will come in and it's all really positive. It's not people taking pot shots at each other with opinions. It's, oh, right, okay, yeah, go on that, you know, and you end up with something better than any one of them would have come up with individually. That's great leadership. And it's not difficult. It just requires you to park your ego and your opinion and to trust your people to come up with something,
Yeah.
and listen carefully to what you feel is important to move forward. Yeah. And
And
that's
is that
great to work
is
with.
oh, sorry. Is it also your observation that, you know, when you look at and I don't know if Thermo Fisher has like a leadership academy or leadership development part to it, I assume it does. Is that the kind of leadership that is being currently sort of advocated by companies generally, that you observe, or is there an emphasis on that at all?
There's definitely been an improvement over the
Okay.
years, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. I'm seeing more and more of that. I still see the old style, dominant voice, let me talk, everybody on mute kind of style of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with new technologies such as video, I just don't see the point in that. When you invite like leaders into a room, I mean, well, use the leadership in the room, but yeah, increasingly I'm seeing much more inclusive style of leadership. It was really common when I first started in, you know, in the business of STEM,
Mm-hmm.
for, you know, it to be old school, old style, but it was more obvious in the larger companies I worked for. And when my early days of Thermo Fisher Scientific, it was quite common.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's faded away and become this new type of leader, which I think is way more effective and way more, I don't know, it's way more fulfilling to work with somebody who's that kind of
Definitely.
leader. Yeah. And then
Absolutely.
obviously there's a role model thing as well. So if you have somebody at the top who's like a dominant style and, you know, quite opinionated and, you know, that kind of thing, it trickles down. Even if you've employed good people who aren't inherently like that, it's just, I don't know, there's a cultural change you create that's not good. So
Yeah.
so things
Yeah.
can change quite dramatically with leadership changes.
And that is one of the reasons, one of the main reasons that we focus on leadership, because it creates the biggest impact if you do it
Mm.
right, and also the biggest impact if you don't do it right. And so
Yeah,
it's very important to make sure that you get it right as well. You
yeah,
know, when you were talking about, you know, inclusive leadership as someone who, or inclusive leader who can, you know, bring the team together, just make sure that everybody contributes. Well, our theory has always been that when you get that kind of leader, they will also be mindful of the diversity of the team, on the
yes,
basis that the more diverse the team is, the better sort of the
Yes.
different contributions. Have you noticed that happening? So inclusive leaders
Yeah.
then also looking to expand the
Yes.
diversity of their teams and the companies in whichever ways they're lacking, like looking at
Yes.
who's not there and should be there. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I have noticed that with the good leaders that I've got in mind. Yeah, for sure, they've been mindful of the 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 energy of the leadership team, and who, what kind of personality. There's more of a personality thing than gender per se, but
Mhm.
sometimes it falls into that because you need to balance out dominant voices. When I first I went on a developing emerging leaders course at Thermo, gosh, back in about 2013, something like that. We did a disc profile, which that sort of
Yeah.
communicating styles profile, and it said, you did this series of questions, and it would give you kind of like a map of where you were and what your communication style was like. And you could be dominant, you could be sort of innovative, you can be conscientious or process orientated, or sort of structure and systems kind of person. And when I went in there and looked at where I was, we had to go into a room and sit around tables, and they had a letter on the table, and they said, according to your profile report, go and sit at the table of your dominant style, on your natural dominant style. And I looked at the room because I was late. I came in late, and I went, oh my God. And everybody was sitting around the D table. And I was sitting in the opposite table, and I sat down there and I nearly cried. And I went to the host of the training thing in the break, and I said, I think I'm in the wrong place. I think I need to just leave. And I was really, really shaken up. And she said, no, Karen, this is the problem.
Yes,
We need
exactly.
greater diversity of approach, and you've got a
Yeah,
different approach, and it's
yeah,
a good thing. And we need to shine the light on this tendency to be dominant, because it's not a
yeah,
good idea.
yeah, yeah.
So that's
That's
changed, thank goodness.
and these sort of personality preference style type assessments are still so prevalent in making sure that the teams are well balanced and companies are well balanced, just
I
to make
believe so. I don't know if it's completely consistently used, but I know of a couple of managers who have used it, and deliberately to make sure that the
yeah,
leadership team has got a good mix. Because
yeah,
you might employ some really brilliant people, but they've all got the same communication style or that kind of personality, and you've got a problem because they're all fighting over each other and don't listen and things like that. Whereas
exactly.
somebody who's a little bit, can balance it out, can bring out the best in the team energy, in the team
Yeah,
dynamics.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we're working on as well with leaders, and also looking at what biases this creates for you. So if
Mhm.
you're a D, for instance, you might take a natural dislike to an
Yeah.
I just because
Yeah.
they operate so differently from you,
Yeah.
and how to bridge that as an inclusive leader. You need to understand that as well. What is their
Yeah.
preference, and how does that impact your color,
Yeah.
your dominant style.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see it as a bit of yin and yang. I mean, I like working with dominant people because it sort of complements my style, but not too much.
Yeah, exactly. It's knowing, well, we
And
have,
they might dismiss me as being a bit, I don't know, passive or wishy-washy, because it's not, no, no, no. But
yeah,
I like to, I like to facilitate. I like to invite, people in. I like to have structures so people know how they're working towards and things like that. So
yeah,
yeah, I care deeply about people's well-being, which is not necessarily what others think
yeah.
in commercial land. So having balance is important.
It just also, to me, just showcases how complex it is to be a good inclusive leader, because it's you're starting out with making sure that everybody contributes, but then the other part of it to me is to understand your own biases towards even preference styles, and this is truly in addressing diversity in all its colors, not just gender or any other type of demographic diversity, understanding beyond that, and how that friction, some friction is good, we know that, but too much, we don't want to shut off somebody. You're talking about the quiet quits, that's happening a lot nowadays. So a good inclusive leader would be aware of that, of their sort of intrinsic biases also that way, on top of the societal ones that are out there. Do you agree?
But we all have our blind spots, though. I have mine, you have yours, and as long as it can be pointed out, or you can just step back and be, ask yourself that question of, I'm about to hire that person because they're quite like me, or do I like that person or trust that person because they think and talk the same way as me? That's important. I mean, my partner is the polar opposite to me, and
so is mine.
It's a yin and yang thing, isn't it? You're attracted to the opposite, and that's a good energy, as long as it, you
could be both.
appreciate what they bring and what you know.
Yeah, absolutely. No, exactly. So if we take that into sort of a more practical space, because what we are also focusing on is obviously the our conference, where we're going to talk more about this next month, is all, we called it the inclusion dividend, and the idea is that the reason that we're focusing on this kind of leadership is because it does present results. And so I wonder if you could share some examples of where you both benefited from inclusive type of leadership and the diversity of the team, as well as perhaps where things may have gone better had there been a bit more inclusion and perhaps diversity. Do you have any examples you could share with us on that?
I guess in my current company, we have a value of involvement, and I think it's one of those where we don't speak enough of that. And if you have the right people in the room, that several things can happen. You have better decision making because you've got the right people in the room who might represent the customer insight, or they might understand the operations behind the system, or whatever problem you're trying to solve. Having the right people in the room is really critical to get to the right conclusion. That seems really obvious.
Yeah.
But also there's a knock-on effect. So there's problem solving and better decision making. That's number one. The second one is, from my observations, is about accountability and responsibility. So if you're trying to do a project and you've not been allowed in to a critical customer meeting or something like that, and you've been excluded, yet you're responsible for the project, for example, you can just check out. So that accountability, responsibility is not followed through. And I've seen that a few times where we're trying to get change to happen, and because the people who should have been in the room were excluded from that, they're going, "Oh, I don't know." And there's also some Chinese whispers that you haven't quite got the thing right, and you start to diverge in what you need to actually do, whether it's in operations, sales, commercial effectiveness, sales or marketing. If you're not really tight on what you actually need to achieve, then that synergy is lost, and there's a lot of wasted energy. So I've seen that a lot as well. And I think the answer to it is always, look, you can't always drag 25 people into a customer meeting, for example. Can't do that. So, okay, so it's only 2 of you. But then you better turn around immediately and work with the rest of the team. You've got to use that information to plan and plot and develop a project that addresses their needs. It's just about communication at the end of the day, and being mindful of how people like to be involved. So I've seen that loads of times, where, people are excluded from critical meetings. I've also seen the opposite, where you have like 25 people in a meeting and lots of people
Decision-based.
like not paying attention, but just sort of having their presence known. And that's also a waste of time and energy. And
Yeah.
you never come to a conclusion either. It's like lots of different opinions, people speaking over each other. Yuck. I can't stand that either. There is a middle ground from my point of view, which is just this, be mindful of who's in the room, communicate more broadly about what is needed and what happened in there, and then having, clarity and decision on what happens next collectively as a leadership team. I try to do that in my team and have the different sub teams with a clear remit of what they need to do, but then this central leadership team that pulls them together. We communicate a lot, we trust each other, and therefore we can stay aligned to what we need to achieve.
Mm.
It's not easy, and I think that alignment thing is a critical piece of it, that just requires you to be diligent about communicating.
Yeah. It's interesting you say. I quite like that term involvement, and alignment as part of that. We have a new tool that we call the diversity lens, and we're gonna launch it is in one of the workshops at the conference. And what it's designed to do is to get a leader to think in a more diverse, with diversity in mind. So, making sure that they ask those questions of who is not in the room and should be. Those are the kind of things that you said already, that who belongs in here. It's one thing to do that, and I'm thinking now that we should maybe even expand it to include your term involvement, because you can't perhaps have everybody in the room that you need in the first go. But practically, and it's a great example that you give as well, to use that, because it can be difficult. So asking yourself that question is step number one as part of involvement, and then beyond that is making sure that you have a process or a plan in mind, how you're going to make it happen, particularly in a big organization like Thermo Fisher, even a department of Thermo Fisher's.
I love Patrick Lencioni. He's a guru in organizational health, and he talks about the 4 Ps of change. And you've got to have a big picture view of where you're going and be able to talk about that. And then you've got to have a plan for how to do it. And everybody needs to understand their part in it, and if they don't, then you get this fragmentation of, getting on board and being responsible. And so I think that's a good one to bear in mind. Is having a really clear vision of why you're doing it, where you're going, and then how the little pieces fall together and how they work together. It's really good. And often we skip to implementation too quickly without communicating that bigger picture. Or we forget to remind people what the bigger picture is, and as we go, and that can lead to fragmentation as well. So
that's part of that wonderful leadership as well, the connecting each person to the purpose as much as the vision. So let me change. We do have a couple of questions. I'll get to them in just a minute. I also wanted to maybe take a look at the challenges that the healthcare center in particular is currently experiencing, that could be addressed with diversity or inclusion. I'm just wondering if you could share some of your insights there.
I think the whole industry that is associated with healthcare is in a bit of turmoil. I've got friends in pharmaceutical companies, smaller biotechnology companies, all feeling the same way. There's this sort of like a very rocky boat we're in at the moment, navigating different waters. We've got AI disruption coming in as well, people figuring out how to streamline, make things better with fewer people, and that's in the mix. And I think it's as rocky as it was in COVID times. That's how it feels to me, at least. You're not really sure where it's going to end or how it's going to be, but for sure we're feeling it. I think it's one of those where we have to be honest about where we are, and you know, when revenue's down and you know your growth's not where it needs to be, it's just treating people like adults about what's going on, and then being as transparent as you can as you navigate, you know, the tough decisions you have to make along the way. That's not always easy because, you know, in Europe we have you know, different rules and regulations, and you know, we have to abide by local laws. So we can't just do a one size fits all. It's this, off we go. It has to be more nuanced than that. But I think even saying that in a team, saying, you know, I hear you. I know there's a lot of anxiety. You know, is at least opening up and acknowledging what people are going through. I think there's a tendency when things are tough is to shut up and not say anything for fear of saying the wrong thing. And that's even worse, in my point of view. So yeah, I do what I can, acknowledge the difficulty that people are going through, admit that I'm going through it too, and you know, and have the door open when people are, you know, feeling wobbly. And more than ever, I mean, I'm a massive believer in well-being. You know, I'm going to take my dog for a walk immediately after this. And I say it over and over to my team, just take breaks, because when things are tough and you're tired, it feels 10 times worse than if you had a good night's sleep and stuff. And that seems really obvious, but when we're in a fast-paced, highly competitive, highly stressful environment, it's easy just to put the pedal down and keep going and press the button and reply to the emails. And before you know it, you're shouting at your husband, and the kids are, you know, not speaking to you because you haven't been out of your office for 14 hours and things like that. That's just rubbish. It's just not a life that many of us want to live.
Yeah.
So to have leaders stand up and say, you know, take a break, and I see how much you're doing, and I know it's hard, I think is really important. But it's something that sometimes gets forgotten as we're in tough times. And yeah, I
Yeah,
can't work with
abs
that.
no, absolutely. And that reminds me of some research I did, and I wrote on a blog. Then there's a direct correlation between the ability of a company to cope with change and ambiguity and the level of investment they put into diversity and inclusion.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes sense, doesn't it?
If ever there's a time when you need to harness synergy and collective brilliance of people, it's when you're in a tough situation. Yet sometimes we get into this situation where we just close ranks, and the same, you know, elite people are in a room working out how it's going to be. And I think the opposite needs to happen. You know, and that's when I think, you know, inclusive leadership comes to the fore.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
takes some bravery, because it means that you've got to listen to people you don't normally listen to.
Yeah,
But if you're going to have change happen, which has to happen when you're in a tough situation, change is inevitable. So you'd better include people in the solution making, because otherwise you're not going to get change to follow through.
absolutely, absolutely. I think that is perhaps the answer to one of the questions from Xiao Chen. What's your leadership strategy when things are tough? Market in low tide, big gap in numbers. I think you've just answered that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to she asked you for a leadership strategy, which I think is to be more inclusive, to listen.
Yeah, just share as quickly as you can what the situation.
That's
If
good,
you
yeah.
can't share it, at least admit that it's tough, and to see people where they are, um, you know, and acknowledge with empathy. And if you have to deliver bad news, you have to do it with empathy,
Yeah,
not with a script
yeah,
and
yeah,
words to read out.
yeah.
It's got
And
to come from the heart.
the danger and the problem is that when there's a lot of pressure and stress in a company, we all retreat into our little cocoons and
Yeah,
forget it's the
yeah,
completely the opposite of what we should be doing, and
yeah. You
something to
should,
look out
yeah,
for.
absolutely. And being vulnerable and being just with your people, with the people that are going to get you out of it. You better be in the same boat as them. And
Exactly.
yeah, that's how I feel. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's look at this other question from Adam. I'll just read it out loud. Karen talked earlier about good leadership requiring people to park their egos. I agree entirely, but I'd love to hear more about how to help and support leaders, particularly new leaders, with parking their ego and empowering their team.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
We spend so much time in our heads. And I feel like sometimes we go into work with like heads on sticks, it's just we're not in connection with our bodies and our subconscious and our intuition and the brilliance that we have in the entirety of this system that we've built born into. And that intuitive wisdom comes from just getting out of your thinking mind and more into presence and more into stillness. And it may sound a bit woo-woo for people who just are used to just running around solving problems, which we all do. But I don't know about you, but I've found the solutions to the hardest problems come in stillness. When you're out walking the dog, or you're in the bath. It's not when you're struggling to fit and come up with something in between calls. It just doesn't work like that. So, and when you go into a leadership team meeting or any kind of meeting, and there's lots of blah, 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 blah going on, being able to sort of just, watch with almost and listen with almost another sense, which is, what's going on here, and feel what needs to happen. That requires you to just be detached and not in it, if you see what I mean. And that's the ego piece, just like part the ego and the fear and the thing that's making you speak up when you really should be letting other people speak, and just understand what's going on in this room at a way deeper level than you have if you're just thinking it through, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And for new leaders to do that, it's just often we're not taught about this. Like I had to learn it through some amazing coaching. But just to be still and to watch and relax and be literally listening with your whole body, that's when you can spot the best ideas and the way through, rather than try and fight over it and get your opinion heard. So that's what I mean about parking your ego, because it allows the space allows people to, bring their ideas in rather than listen to you harp on. And your job is to figure out, the best one. Or maybe you're not very good at discernment and somebody else is, and you can go, what do you think? And they can help you. It's just, that's what I mean by parking your ego. You don't have to come into that room knowing all the answers. You just have to know that the answer's there. You're just going to have to spot it somehow.
Yeah. Just find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I
But
think with
too often leaders go in with I need to say the thing, and and for this team to follow through on what I say.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it, yeah,
yeah.
they miss out on just hearing the answer.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. But with new leaders, I suppose sometimes they feel like they have to prove themselves.
Yeah,
So, suspending
yeah,
their egos is the opposite of what they think they need to
yeah.
do.
I know. I have a mastermind of new leaders, where I'm trying to bring in things like trust in others and surrender, which
Yeah.
doesn't mean giving up. It means consciously letting go. And
Hmm.
and these are concepts that people go, what was she on about? So we don't normally talk about these things, about collaboration and alignment and things like that.
Yeah.
But they are the deeper level of leadership that I think is so and so important, and it gets lost in lots of leadership programs where we
Yeah.
talk about skill set and competency.
Totally. Yeah.
Mm.
So one of the sort of the best coaching advice that I've been giving, that's contradiction in terms, isn't it? Coaching advice, but I've been given is to always ask yourself, what do they need to hear now? So as a leader, if you go into a room like that with a preconceived notion of what you're going to say, that's one thing. But if you think about, okay, where are they? What do they need to know? What do I need to say to them that they really need to hear? Will be very different from what you think in the first instance.
And that's what I mean by going in and sensing the room, because you don't always know going in. And if you've got pre-prepared slide set and off you go, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh,
yeah,
miss a massive opportunity to connect and to get that motivation and belonging and just a group understanding of what you need to achieve. So that's so important.
Exactly, rather than ego. Let me say, well, we have a few more minutes left. I wanted to ask you if you had any sort of practical tips or words of wisdom for our audience to take away with something specific that you think can serve them well, either as leaders or as individuals, to harness the power of inclusion and diversity.
I think there was one week where I sat down at the dinner table with my family and I asked a brave question, and I said, what if you could change something about me, what would it be? And I was expecting them to say, you know, don't shop at Bowden, they would say, something like that. But one of them said, you need to listen more, mummy.
Ooh.
And the other one said, yeah. And then they did an impression of me not listening to them. And I just thought, oh, God. And so I decided then to do a listening week, right? And I listened to a podcast about what that would be and what I needed to do more of. And it's not just hearing, it's like being present. It's that understanding what's being said and not being said, feeling the energy of the person, but also letting them know that you've heard them. You've done it beautifully, which is sort of reframing what I've said, or what they've said in what you've heard, so that we can check whether it's, we understand each other. So that active listening is a skill, and I think that's the one skill that we all need to learn. I wish, if you get to a certain level in a company, that everybody has to get a coaching accreditation, because coaching is a skill that should be powerful questioning to lead a guide a person, not lead them, guide them in partnership through a creative process of transformation. And you can do that in teams, you can do that at individual level, but asking questions powerfully, waiting for the answer, not jumping in with your opinion or advice, is a skill I am nowhere near where I need to be with that. But it is just so powerful, and it's very powerful in a team sense as well.
Yeah, no, I am completely on board with that. That is great advice, actually. And when you come to the conference, I'm going to introduce you to my very long time coach and friend, who that's what she is. She calls herself the listening coach, because that is the essence of her work. She's also fantastic. Karen, thank you so much for your time and your insights. We could obviously go on and on and on to talk about this, but we only have an hour. I know people need to get back to their desks, and that's the 1 hour they took away.
Yes.
Re-energize, to hear the views of someone else and consider different ways of working, maybe. So thank you very much for that.
Well, it's a pleasure, Rena. It's always a pleasure to talk about stuff like this. This lights me up. I think it's so important in businesses to get great performance and the best out of your teams and people. And we still need to do it more relevant than ever.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we're gonna continue the conversation. We're gonna share a slide. Like I mentioned the conference already a couple of times, and I know some of you on here are already coming to that. So the conference that I'm talking about, the Inclusion Dividend, it's our leadership conference and awards. So the conference is called the inclusion dividend, as it says so, where we will have similar panel conversations that we just did with Karen on a number of different topics with leaders who will share their experience on how diversity and inclusion can help build success in business and also address the challenges. We'll have a few breakout sessions where we'll introduce some of the tools. I mentioned one of them, the diversity lens, how you can bring that into your leadership. And most importantly as well, we'll celebrate people who are already doing this in their lives. And Karen, you are a finalist. I will say that for everyone as well. So she made the short list of Inclusion Leaders Awards. If you're interested in coming along, please take a look at the website, see if it's something that sounds good, looks good, something that you might think would be a good investment of your time or your company's time for you, and with some learnings. We'd love to see you there. And separately, I think you are actually our final conversation of the year with leaders, virtual conversations with leaders, because we have the conference next year, next month, and then it's a break. We'll come back with a new program next year with virtual conversations. We will still curating it, thinking about what is the most relevant thing that's going to be powerful to discuss then. So we'll come back to you on that. Thank you all very much for attending. Thank you for taking the time again, Karen. It's lovely to see you as always.
Welcome, Rena.
And have a great afternoon, everyone.
Yes, thanks everyone. All
Thank
right.
you.
See you soon. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.